Hello, dear viewers of my video. I hope you enjoy watching it and look forward to your feedback in the comments. You ever feel like the walls you helped build suddenly close in and pretend they don't know your name? That's what it felt like. Hello, my name is Monica. I arrived at the Gala of Innovation Recognition, our company's annual awards event, dressed in the only tailored outfit I owned, navy blue with soft shoulder pads that gave me the illusion of confidence. I clutched my presentation folder like it was armor. Inside it were the slides, models, and data visualizations for the predictive platform I'd spent 9 months developing. A system that had quietly revolutionized how our logistics team handled procurement timelines and supplier demand curves. I was invited. That part is important. I wasn't crashing the event. I'd received the formal email from corporate 2 weeks prior, CC'd with my department, and RSVP'd by our executive assistant, complete with the gold-trimmed invite bearing my name. I was expecting a table. I was expecting a small plaque, maybe even a quick handshake on stage if they weren't running behind schedule. I didn't need fireworks or a spotlight, just something, anything that said, "We see you." Instead, when I reached the double doors of the Marriott ballroom, Renata from marketing stepped in front of me. Her eyes did a quick scan of my outfit, her brows twitching upward just slightly. "Monica," she said, her voice dipped in that false sugar she reserved for HR seminars and coffee chats with board members. "Hi." "Hey," I smiled. "Is this the check-in line?" Renata's smile didn't reach her eyes. "So, there's been a little hiccup with the seating chart." She waved a clipboard with names I wasn't about to read upside down. "We're a bit over capacity." I looked past her. Inside the ballroom, clusters of round tables gleamed under chandeliers. White linen, polished silverware, name tags propped in little golden holders. I could see my department seated 2 rows from the stage, chatting comfortably over flutes of champagne. I blinked. But I RSVP'd. "I know," she said with that wide corporate sympathy. "It's just that with the executive expansion and plus ones, we had to prioritize leadership-facing roles." Leadership-facing. Like I was some kind of back-end ghost who made things work from behind a curtain. "I'm one of the nominees for the Innovation Excellence Award," I said. "My predictive logistics model." Renata raised her hand like she was stopping traffic. "Yes, that entry was incredible. Thomas really outdid himself." I froze. "What?" She leaned in conspiratorially. "Don't worry, there's still the general session after the awards. You can wait outside for now." And then, as if summoned by my escalating heartbeat, Thomas walked by. He didn't see me at first, too busy adjusting his tux jacket and smoothing back his perfectly tousled hair. But then he caught sight of me and actually smirked. "Oh, you made it." He glanced at my folder. "You didn't think they'd actually call you up, did you?" I stared at him. He shrugged. "You're not on the run of show, Monica. Why would we waste a seat on you?" My mouth went dry. That predictive platform, the algorithm they were about to celebrate him for, was mine. My code, my equations, my sleepless nights, and 2 a.m. coffee runs. He'd been on the team, sure, but mostly to ask me to explain how the regression parameters worked and then forget by the next morning. I'd written the framework, iterated the model, stress-tested every variable. When we hit a budget wall in February, I was the one who fought to keep the project alive by proving it would save the company $2.3 million annually. And yet, here I stood, watching a man who once asked me if log normal was a typo bask in the glow of my success. I looked around. Everyone else had a seat. Even Ren, the intern who, accidentally, copied my logistics notes during a shared file review, and later presented them in her own onboarding deck. She sat sipping her cocktail and laughing with our CFO, like she'd belonged there forever. It wasn't just tonight. It was every moment that led up to this one. Every time my name had been left off a slide. Every quick chat where someone asked for my help only to present my work in a prettier font under their name. Every time I was told to be patient and strategic, while others leapfrogged over me because they understood the optics. I took a breath, a deep, focused breath. Then I opened my laptop. "What are you doing?" Renata asked, suddenly wary. I didn't answer. I pulled up an email draft already queued in my outbox. Subject line: Attribution Audit and Internal Misconduct Evidence. Attached, time-stamped emails, Slack threads, GitHub commits, meeting recordings, screenshots, a cross-reference of code snippets from my local development folder, and the final submission Thomas sent in under his credentials. All with metadata, all backed up twice. With one click, I hit send. To the entire executive team, to the board, to HR, to legal. I turned back to Thomas. "Check your email," I said. My voice didn't shake, and then I turned and walked away. The ballroom door clicked shut behind me. My heels echoed down the corridor like punctuation. I didn't look back, not even when I heard the sudden hush ripple through the room, followed by the unmistakable chorus of phones buzzing. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed too. First, a call from the CEO. Then, a voicemail from our VP of Product, a text from the HR director, another from our department head. I didn't answer any of them, because the game had changed, and I wasn't playing defense anymore. To understand why I walked away, you need to know who I was before the smirks, the stolen credit, the closed doors. I wasn't always this quiet storm. There was a time I believed, truly believed, that if you worked hard, did the right thing, and stayed focused, everything would fall into place. I grew up in a house full of books and debates. My mother was a linguistics professor with a soft spot for syntax puzzles, and my father a theoretical physicist who insisted breakfast wasn't over until we'd solved at least one equation scribbled on the whiteboard beside the kitchen table. We didn't talk about popularity or status or money. We talked about ideas, about solving things that others thought couldn't be solved. By the time I was 16, I'd published a paper in a national youth journal about modeling public transport efficiency using queuing theory. At 19, I was presenting at data science symposiums next to PhDs twice my age. I graduated early with dual degrees in statistics and computational systems, then earned a fellowship to work on logistical optimization frameworks that won a government innovation grant. I didn't fall into analytics, I ran toward it. And for a while, my path made perfect sense. When I first joined Octris Dynamics, it felt like the place I'd always been preparing for, a culture of problem solvers. They gave me room to explore ideas, to test boundaries, to build things that mattered. My models helped cut warehouse transit times by 22% in 6 months. I redesigned a supplier tracking system that reduced lead time variability by 14%. My team leaders encouraged me, and I felt seen. Until Dominic arrived. Dominic LaVille, our new department head. Former consultant, ex-McKinsey, the kind of man who introduced himself with a firm handshake and a memorized metric. He wore charisma like armor and made every all-hands meeting sound like a TED Talk. People laughed at his jokes before he even finished them. HR loved him. Upper management adored him. I didn't. Not from the beginning. It wasn't because he was different. It was because he pretended to value the same things I did: curiosity, innovation, integrity, while quietly rearranging the chessboard behind the scenes. The first time it happened, it was subtle. I'd spent weeks refining a stochastic model to predict supply fluctuations based on historical weather trends and political unrest across shipping corridors. I presented it during a Friday meeting, sharing my slides, code links, everything. Dominic nodded through the presentation, called it intriguing, and said he'd review it further. 2 weeks later, the model appeared in a board update email, authored by Dominic. No mention of me. Just a throwaway line. Our team developed a new forecasting approach. Preliminary results are promising. I was stunned. I asked him, politely, carefully, if maybe there'd been a mistake. He smiled. This isn't about credit, Monica. It's about alignment. Leadership sees the output. We need to speak with one voice. One voice. His voice. I told myself it was a miscommunication, that it would pass. But it didn't. Again and again, I watched as pieces of my work, my research, my prototypes, things I'd developed alone or in small groups, surfaced in presentations I wasn't invited to. Projects I'd originated were rebranded under Dominic's name. Colleagues stopped making eye contact when it happened. Some even whispered apologies in the break room, like mourners at a professional funeral. I tried escalating once. Quietly. I brought documentation to HR, emails, file timestamps, internal chats. The HR manager flipped through the folder without meeting my eye. "These were created during work hours, using company systems?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Then they're company property." "But Dominic is your manager. It's appropriate for him to speak on behalf of the department. And, Monica, you may want to focus more on visibility. Sit closer to the center in meetings. Be more vocal." Be more vocal, like shouting would change the watermark on my stolen work. So I tried to play the game. I spoke up more, pushed my own initiatives. But each time I gained traction, someone, stepped in to reroute credit before it reached my name. And the worst part? I let it happen. For far too long. Because I didn't know how to fight without becoming the very thing I despised. Because I still clung to the belief that integrity would win, that people would see. But they didn't. Or they chose not to. Instead, they clapped for Thomas. For Ren. For Dominic. And I stayed behind the curtain, waiting for someone to notice I'd been holding up the stage lights. Now you understand. Why I snapped the way I did. Why that moment outside the ballroom wasn't a breakdown. It was the first time I stopped waiting for permission to be seen. The problem with being brilliant in a room full of cowards is that no one ever defends you. They just watch you burn and take notes on how to light the next match. I kept trying. Even after HR gave me that lifeless response, focus more on visibility, I kept building, kept solving. Because the work still mattered to me. Because I didn't know how to not care. Over the next few months, I developed a hybrid projection tool that merged supplier behavior patterns with our inventory drift data. It flagged anomalies before they became losses, literally saving us over $1.1 million in Q3. When I submitted my report, Dominic skimmed it and mumbled something about needing to clean up the messaging before presenting. 2 weeks later, he walked into the executive review with a smile and a shiny new dashboard labeled Forecast IQTM on his tablet. My dashboard. I wasn't invited to the meeting. Again. When I asked him afterward if he wanted me to walk leadership through the architecture, he laughed. "They're not interested in the guts, Monica. Just the output." That became his mantra. Just the output. Which was funny, considering I built the guts, the bones, the brain. And then there were the rewrites. Code reviews where he would take working models, tweak one variable, and resubmit them under his name. Team efficiency, he called it. Collaborative iteration. I was drowning in erasure. My peers stopped including me in side projects. One even told me, kindly, that I made people nervous by overachieving. "Dominic doesn't like when someone outpaces the chain of command," she whispered over coffee, like she was warning me about a dangerous pet. And then Ren arrived. Ren Hollis. Fresh out of Columbia. All perfect curls, polished teeth, and LinkedIn bravado. She was the niece of our CEO, which she never actually said, but everyone knew. She'd barely been through onboarding before she was popping into executive meetings to observe. I tried to be generous. God knows I remember what it felt like to be new, eager, underestimated. So when she asked to shadow me, I said yes. When she wanted access to my documentation just to learn, I gave her a sanitized version of my latest modular framework, a redesign of our procurement interface that I'd been fine-tuning for weeks. 2 weeks later, that design showed up in her final project presentation. Same interface, same logic, same user flow. She'd changed the color scheme and moved the icons around, but it was mine. Exactly mine. I sat in the back of the conference room that day, watching as she clicked through my work, her voice all excitement and breathless innovation. The execs were dazzled. Dominic stood beside her, arms crossed, nodding proudly like a mentor who'd shaped a genius from scratch. They clapped. And when she was announced as the winner of the quarterly Innovation Excellence Award, the room erupted. I didn't. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap, my nails biting into my palms. She walked past me on the way back to her table, paused, smiled. Thanks again for showing me that interface logic. It really helped clarify my approach. My approach. That was the moment it snapped. All of it. The promotions that never came. The team credits that erased my name. The idea I pitched in January that reappeared in March with Thomas's name on it and a funding bonus attached. The conference I applied to speak at, only to be told the department could only sponsor one presenter, and then watched Dominic take my slides to Berlin. And now, Ren, an intern, a child, practically, smiling at me with a glass award in one hand and my life's work in the other. I stood, left the room, locked myself in the third-floor supply closet, and screamed into a box of old banners no one used anymore. When I calmed down enough to see straight, I went to HR. Again. I sat across from Ms. Halverson, the HR lead, and explained everything. Every idea, every timestamp, every theft, every incident of credit laundering. She didn't even reach for a notepad. "Monica," she said gently, "I understand this is frustrating, but in a collaborative work environment, it's difficult to separate where one person's contribution ends and another's begins." "I have records," I said. "Version control, emails, logs." She sighed. "But you shared those documents voluntarily, correct? During work hours? On company equipment?" I nodded. "Then they fall under shared intellectual property," she said. "I'm not minimizing your frustration, but from a corporate perspective, Dominic is within his rights to reframe department contributions for executive audiences." Reframe. That's the word she used. I thanked her. Left quietly. I didn't scream this time. I walked back to my desk, stared at my screen, and realized something very simple. I was never going to win by playing fair in a game that was rigged from the start. And that was the moment I stopped playing their game. I didn't cry. Not that day. Not when Ren clutched the award that should have been mine. Not when HR wrapped gaslighting in policy language. Not even when I returned to my desk and found my project access quietly revoked. I didn't cry. But something shifted. For the first time in my life, I stopped believing the system was just broken. I started to understand it was designed that way, built to run on silence, on talent drained through pipelines of plausible deniability, then presented in shinier packages with better smiles. So I made a decision. If I wasn't going to be recognized within the system, I'd create one where people like me never had to ask for permission to be seen. It started small. I began documenting everything, every model, every diagram, every code commit. I timestamped internal messages, archived Slack threads, cross-referenced decks, and project briefings. I recorded meetings where Dominic casually referred to his team's developments, and then matched his words to concepts I'd originated alone. I didn't use company devices. I didn't log in from the office. Every byte of evidence lived on a private cloud under a name no one would recognize. And then I reached out. First, to Marta, our former supply chain specialist. She'd left abruptly 6 months ago, officially citing family reasons. But I remembered the way she looked in her final week, like something had broken and she no longer had the energy to tape it back together. When I emailed her, I kept it brief. "Have you ever had your work taken without credit?" "I think we both know the answer." She replied in less than an hour. "I still have the original code. Let's talk." Next came Alex, the back-end engineer, who built our earliest API integration and mysteriously vanished after a realignment. Then Tanya, from Procurement Analytics, who designed the adaptive routing matrix Dominic pitched as his own to the board in Q2. Each of them had a version of my story. Each of them had stayed quiet, hoping things would get better. Each of them had proof, and each of them still had ideas, unfinished, shelved, or buried beneath bureaucracy. Ideas that deserved to live. Within a month, we were 9. We met in coffee shops, co-working lounges, and encrypted Zoom calls. At first, it felt like a support group, a place to unbury the frustration that had calcified in our chests. But then something beautiful happened. The bitterness gave way to building. We sketched out a vision, a new platform, a clean sheet innovation space rooted in transparency, collaboration, and ethical recognition. We called it Verity, because truth would be at the center of everything we did. Our prototype? A modular, AI-driven logistics framework that redefined predictive supply modeling, not just improving efficiency, but adapting in real time to geopolitical and environmental shifts. It was bold, raw, brilliant. The bones of Verity were built on the very algorithms they'd stolen from us, but reimagined, expanded, perfected. Not diluted by marketing jargon or executive ego. Every contributor was credited by default. Every commit logged with full attribution. Every interface designed for clarity over showmanship. We weren't just building software. We were building a sanctuary for the brilliant and bruised. I registered the company under a holding entity. Tanya had a contact in legal. Marta's brother, a graphic designer, helped us craft a brand that looked nothing like a rebellion and everything like the future. We gave ourselves a deadline, 6 months. 6 months to finish our prototype, pitch investors, and prepare for a quiet, coordinated departure. And then, when the time came, we would show them. Not with rage, not with lawsuits, but with the only thing they'd never been able to steal from us: ourselves. It turns out that when you've spent years being ignored, underestimated, and quietly stripped of your power, you learn how to move without making noise. By the time I stepped into Gail Iverson's office, I knew exactly what I was about to say. No apologies, no qualifiers. Just the pitch. Clean, powerful, undeniable. Gail was a venture capitalist with a reputation for backing what she called integrity disruptors. Startups built by people who didn't just want to win, but wanted to fix what had been broken. Her space was minimalist. Industrial chic, exposed brick, glass walls. No one sat behind desks. Ideas floated, not hierarchies. She barely glanced at the elevator when I arrived, just waved me over to a low table and poured 2 cups of black tea. No sugar, no small talk. "Let's hear it," she said. So I began. I introduced Verity, not just as a platform, but as a philosophy, a data-integrated, machine-learning logistics model that predicted demand, weather, and geopolitical impact with 97% accuracy in field tests. But more importantly, it was ethical by design. Transparent, authorship tracked, every line of code attributed, every data point traceable. Then, I told her what we were building against. Not with names, just the outline of a company that thrived on absorption, where credit floated upward and innovation got strangled in the bureaucracy of ego. She leaned in. "How far along is your prototype?" I tapped my tablet and turned it toward her. She swiped, paused, zoomed into one of the dashboard simulations. "This is better than," she started, then caught herself. I smiled. "We know." She set the tablet down. "Why now?" I answered honestly. Because we were tired of having our brilliance extracted and buried. Because the best talent in the industry is walking away from legacy firms and no one's asking why. Because we've all built empires for other people and watched our names vanish in the footnotes. Silence. Then she asked the question that mattered most. "Who's we?" I opened the folder in front of me. 9 profiles, engineers, analysts, architects, all with a shared history, undervalued, uncredited, replaced. Every person on this team has created something you've heard of, and none of them got credit. We're done waiting. Gail sat back, crossed her arms. "How much are you asking?" I didn't flinch. 1.8 million pre-seed, convertible note. She stared at me. then reached for her phone. 5 minutes later, she hung up and slid a folder across the table. "You'll have terms by the end of the day." Just like that. We were funded. The next few weeks were a blur of creation. We rented a studio loft in a warehouse district under a holding name. Leo, Tanya, Marta, everyone came on board officially. Some quit their jobs immediately, others waited. Quiet coordination, whispered Slack messages, encrypted drives. Our new version of the logistics model, Verity Nexus, blew the original out of the water. It didn't just optimize supply lines, it learned, adapted, predicted risk patterns before they emerged. The old company's model had been built for quarterly margins. Ours? For the future. We added ethical flags, real-time stakeholder visibility, smart negotiation tools for vendors to prevent the manipulation we'd seen too many times. And slowly, steadily, we began preparing for launch. Everything timed, everything legal, patents filed, domain registered, press release drafted. We didn't scream, we planned. Because revenge isn't noise, it's precision. And ours was almost ready. The morning of the award ceremony, I didn't feel nervous. I felt calm. The kind of calm you only get when you've rehearsed every step of the exit, when you've made peace with the fallout, when you've turned pain into precision and found your power in the very place they tried to erase it. I wore the same navy sheath dress from the last ceremony. I wanted them to remember what they didn't see the first time. My team, former colleagues now turned co-founders, were each in place. Some still within the company, dressed like attendees. Others waiting outside, monitoring servers, email queues, and social channels. At exactly 10:47 a.m., the lights dimmed inside the grand conference hall. A low hum of anticipation settled over the crowd. The Innovation Excellence Award, our company's highest recognition, was about to be presented. To Ren. Again. Her project, they claimed, had revolutionized procurement forecasting. So, a dazzling mix of AI efficiency and human-centric design. It was my model, refactored, dressed up, branded with a name she probably didn't even choose herself. I stood at the back of the hall, hidden behind a pillar. My laptop sat open inside a sleek black folio, cursor hovering over a single glowing button, labeled Execute Campaign. The moment the VP stepped on stage and said, "We are proud to present this year's award to," I clicked. Everything happened at once. Emails exploded into inboxes. To the entire executive team, the board, legal, and the media liaison. A letter titled, "Formal Notice of Intellectual Property, Misappropriation and Attribution Breach," complete with timestamps, evidence, Slack logs, source code histories, and a video breakdown of identical model behavior pre- and post-theft. To HR and department leads, resignation letters, 8 of them, coordinated, timed to hit their inboxes in perfect sequence, each from a key team member, each citing ethics violations, leadership misconduct, and systemic credit suppression. To the press, a beautifully written release, embargoed until 11 a.m., announcing the launch of Verity Systems. It highlighted our mission of transparent innovation, ethical attribution, and revolutionary supply chain modeling. Our investors were listed, our founding team spotlighted, and, very prominently, our names. My name, Monica Reyes, founder, Chief Innovation Officer, architect of the model that had quietly changed everything. Inside the hall, phones started buzzing, faces turned pale, conversations hushed, eyes scanned screens. The VP froze mid-sentence. Ren, already halfway to the stage, paused with a confused laugh. The projection screen flickered, then switched. And there it was. Verity Systems, built by the brilliant, not the political. Beneath it, our logo, our mission, and a side-by-side comparison of my original interface next to Ren's plagiarized version, annotated with matching variable structures and unchanged logic paths. You could hear the air evacuate from the room. Somewhere near the front, someone gasped. Someone else dropped a phone. The CEO's face turned the color of printer paper. I closed my laptop, straightened my posture, and walked into the room. All heads turned. I didn't go to the stage. I went straight to the center aisle, stopping just past the first row. All eyes followed. "I see the celebration's begun," I said, voice clear and unshaken. "So let's talk about what you're really celebrating." The silence was absolute. I let it stretch for just long enough to hurt. "3 years ago, I gave you innovation, loyalty, and brilliance," I said, turning toward the executives. "You gave me gaslighting, erasure, and theft." Someone tried to interrupt. I raised one hand and kept going. "You gave my credit to interns, my voice to your department heads, my ideas to your brand, and you forgot one very basic truth. Authors remember what they build." Then I turned toward the crowd. "So we built something better. Without you." I clicked one final button on my phone. A screen above the stage lit up with a bold announcement: Verity Systems, live today. Underneath, 6 strategic clients confirmed, a global pilot launching Q1, and a leadership team of the people you dismissed. The VP fumbled with her mic. "Monica, this isn't yours anymore," I said. Then I walked out, past the rows of stunned faces, past Ren, still clutching an award for something she never created, past the VP, blinking like the lights were too bright. Outside, the sun was sharp and cold. My phone buzzed nonstop in my bag. Investors confirming, reporters reaching out, ex-colleagues asking if there was room on the team. There was, because this wasn't just revenge. This was resurrection. And we were just getting started. By the time I reached the sidewalk, the calls had started. First, Dominic. 4 missed calls in 2 minutes. Then a voicemail from HR, urgent, breathless. Then a text from Renata. "This is fixable, let's talk." I didn't answer. I kept walking. By the time I got to the cafe where my team was waiting, we'd already gone viral. Industry newsletters picked up the story. LinkedIn exploded with posts from former coworkers saying they'd always known Monica was the real talent. My inbox filled with media requests, congratulations, and quiet, desperate job inquiries. But the messages that really told me the storm had hit, those came from the top. At 3:17 p.m., I got an email from the CEO himself. Subject line: "Let's find a solution." He offered a private meeting. "We want to make this right. You've made your point. We're prepared to offer compensation and a leadership position, effective immediately." He even attached a draft contract, VP of Innovation, high 6-figure salary, signing bonus, equity options. I read it once, closed it, never replied. At 4:01, Dominic tried again, this time via text. "We were under pressure, things moved fast, it wasn't personal." He followed it with, "Let's not burn bridges you might need later." That was the moment I knew he was scared, not just of my company, but of my clarity, of how dangerous a woman becomes when she finally realizes her silence was their most valuable tool. Then came the threats. At 5:28 p.m., our legal inbox received a letter from the firm's lawyers alleging violation of intellectual property rights. It was toothless, vague, and littered with words like pending review and reputational damage. Marta forwarded it to me with a single sentence: "They're flailing." By the next morning, a new message came in, this one quieter, more manipulative, from someone I'd once trusted in leadership. "We can end this quietly, let's talk numbers." They offered me a buyout. 7 figures. I stared at the number on the screen. It would have changed my life 2 years ago. Now, it just looked like hush money. I clicked reply, typed 2 words, "No thanks," and pressed send. Because here's what none of them understood. I wasn't building Verity to be recognized. I was building it to be free. To never again sit in a room and be told, "You can wait outside." To never again have to smile while someone else accepted applause for my brilliance. To give other brilliant, bruised people the room to rise without begging for permission. We didn't have polished executive headshots or PR consultants. We had whiteboards stained with marker, couches that didn't match, and a Slack channel called "Oh, Revenge by Design." We had laughter again, late-night brainstorms, Chinese takeout, people who actually said, "Good idea," and meant it. We were building fast, launching faster, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself. No fear, no compromises, no one holding a door half open while pretending they were doing me a favor. This was my door, and I just kicked it wide open. We launched Verity Systems at exactly 9 a.m. on a Monday. There was no countdown, no champagne, just the dull hum of our small borrowed server stack and the weight of every silent promise we had made to ourselves. By 9:12, the first ping hit our support channel, a client inquiry from one of the top 10 logistics firms in the country. At 9:27, another came in, then three more. By 11 a.m., I looked over at Tanya, who stared at the screen, stunned, and said quietly, "They're lining up." I didn't speak. I was too busy watching the dominoes fall. They weren't just any clients. They were companies that had once relied on my stolen models, the ones built under a banner that claimed to value innovation while silencing the very people who delivered it. Now, those same clients wanted something more than performance metrics. They wanted integrity. By 2:30 that afternoon, two of them had requested immediate integration trials. By the end of the day, we'd signed 3 short-term contracts and received 5 more serious offers for negotiation. We weren't even officially 1 week old. On Wednesday, a reporter from Tech Forum Weekly reached out. They'd heard about our launch. "A tip from someone inside your old company," she said. I asked for 24 hours. When I hung up, I turned to Marta and said, "We're going to need a media kit." That Friday, the feature hit their homepage. Verity Systems, the startup built by the silenced and poised to reshape the future of ethical innovation. The response was explosive. Comments, shares, inbound requests, mentions across platforms. But the most telling reaction came from the company I'd walked away from. That same morning, their stock dropped 11%. Over the next 2 weeks, board members began quietly exiting. One left citing philosophical differences, another, internal misalignment. The CEO released a tone-deaf statement about the evolving landscape of innovation, as though buzzwords could patch what he helped break. Dominic disappeared from their leadership page entirely. No announcement, no thank you, just erased, the way he had erased so many of us. I didn't feel smug, not the way I thought I might. I felt, still. Because the real victory wasn't watching them crumble, it was watching us rise. Verity was more than a company, it was proof. Proof that you could build a workplace where brilliance didn't come with bruises, where credit wasn't hoarded, and fear didn't hover in every meeting, where collaboration wasn't code for, "You do the work, I'll take the bow." We built it differently from day one. Every team member was credited in real time. Every feature tagged with contributors. Every meeting began with one simple question. What do you need to do your best work this week? And the answers mattered. We hung our first client contract on the wall, not because of the number, but because it came with a handwritten note. You restored our faith in working with people, not brands. Marta led a training session for a new client integration and finished it with tears in her eyes. They asked me to explain the theory, she said, still stunned. Not just implement it. They wanted to learn from me. Leo stayed in the office until midnight, refining a system he'd first started under Dominic's regime. Back then, it was stripped down and rebranded as someone else's shortcut. Now, it had his name on every line and every decision. We weren't just growing, we were healing. Our workspace wasn't perfect. The Wi-Fi dropped every time it rained. The heating system groaned like an old ship. The fridge made ominous noises, and the chairs didn't match. But every time I stepped through the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt welcomed. I'd once spent hours trying to shrink myself to fit into a place that only valued the parts of me it could monetize. Now, for the first time, I took up space, and no one flinched. The real satisfaction didn't come from the headlines, or the investor calls, or the former colleagues quietly asking if there was a place for them on our team. It came in the quiet moments, the ones no one saw. It came when Tanya stood beside the whiteboard, arms crossed, laughing again. When Alex casually said, "This is the first job I've ever had where I don't feel like I'm apologizing for existing." It came when I looked around a room full of people who had once been silenced and realized no one was afraid to speak anymore. That was the real reward, not the collapse of the house that burned us, but the building of one we could finally call home. The message came in the form of a calendar invite, clean, impersonal, and clearly not written by him. Private strategic discussion, requested by Dominic LaVille. I stared at the screen for a long time, the cursor blinking like it was holding its breath. 2 years ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. 2 years ago, that name still meant influence, mentorship, a door that might finally open. Now, it was just a ghost knocking at the gates of something he didn't build. I accepted the meeting, but on my terms. No office towers, no sleek boardroom under his company's banner. We met at a quiet rooftop garden cafe, 3 blocks from Verity's downtown workspace. A neutral space, mine in spirit, if not in name. He arrived 10 minutes early, still polished, still composed, but thinner somehow. Not physically, just less certain. Like he wasn't used to walking into rooms where he wasn't the authority. We exchanged no pleasantries. He got straight to it. "I'm not here to rehash the past," Dominic said, folding his hands over a slim leather folder. "What's done is done. I'm here because your company is making waves. Good ones, impressive ones." I didn't respond. He continued, "We've been watching your growth, and it's clear Verity has tapped into something rare. But you're still in the early phase. You're carrying everything: product, leadership, risk. It's a heavy load." I arched an eyebrow. He nodded toward the folder. "What I'm offering is a solution, an acquisition. We bring Verity into our ecosystem, full backing, full infrastructure. You retain creative control. You'd be named Global Head of Innovation across all subsidiaries. Vision, budget, expansion, yours." I opened the folder. An 8-figure buyout, transitional clauses, equity options, a pre-drafted press release already titled, "Monica Reyes Returns to Redefine the Future." I closed it after 20 seconds. "No," Dominic blinked. "That's fast." "That's generous," I said calmly. He leaned forward. "You don't even want to negotiate?" "No," I repeated. His smile turned brittle. "Monica, come on, you've proven your point. You've done what most people only dream of. But now it's time to scale, to go global. With our backing, you could do this 10 times over." "With your backing," I said, "I'd be right back in the same system that tried to erase me." "This is different." "It's not." He exhaled. "You think you're protecting something pure. But the world doesn't run on purity. It runs on power, on reach." "I know," I said. "That's why I built a place where reach doesn't come at the cost of recognition." He scoffed. "You think Verity will stay this idealistic forever? Wait until the lawsuits start. Wait until your team wants raises you can't match. Wait until investors push back." I didn't flinch. "We're ready for all of that. Because we built our foundation differently. Our people aren't here for inflated titles or empty perks. They're here because they were denied space, and now they finally have it." He shook his head. "You're walking away from a legacy." "No," I said. "I'm protecting one." I stood slowly. "Let me explain something you never understood, Dominic. I don't want a title someone else hands me in a polished offer. I don't want a desk with a gold plaque in a building I didn't help shape." I pointed toward the city skyline. "I have a team who would walk through fire for each other. Engineers who aren't afraid to speak. Designers who don't have to pitch their souls just to be heard. We're building things together, not for credit, not for clicks, but because we believe that brilliant people should be able to breathe while they work." He opened his mouth, then closed it. For once, Dominic LaVille had nothing to say. I took one last look at him. Power means nothing to me if I have to become someone else to keep it. And with that, I left. No handshake, no farewell. Because he didn't need closure. He needed to understand that some doors don't swing back open just because you finally noticed they were closed. Back at Verity, my team was gathered around a table littered with wires, post-its, and takeout boxes. They were arguing about a product beta and laughing like the stakes weren't high. Because when you're trusted, even pressure feels like play. They paused when I walked in. "Well?" Marta asked. I smiled. "He offered everything." Leo grinned. "You take it?" I shook my head. "We already have everything." And they cheered. Not because we'd won something, but because we'd kept something that couldn't be bought. A company where no one had to wait outside the door again. A home for the unseen. A legacy on our terms. The lights dimmed slowly over the grand ballroom of the Global Innovation Summit. Rows upon rows of chairs stretched out before the stage, each filled with someone who had, at one point, dared to imagine something better. Some were fresh graduates with cracked screen laptops. Others were veteran engineers with scars from 1,000 unrewarded ideas. All of them were listening. To me. I stood backstage, heart steady. My hands were loose at my sides, not clenched like they used to be before meetings where I'd have to fight to speak. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't small. This time, the stage wasn't someone else's territory. It was mine. The announcer introduced me with a line that still felt surreal. "Please welcome Monica Reyes, founder and chief innovation officer of Verity Systems." The applause swelled. Not polite, not rehearsed. Real. I stepped out into the light, alone. I didn't carry notes. I didn't bring a teleprompter. Just a story. I waited for the room to settle, then leaned into the microphone and said, without hesitation, "You can wait outside." The words hit the air like a memory no one wanted to revisit. Several faces twitched in surprise. A few looked uncomfortable, but many, too many, nodded. Slowly, quietly. "I was told that once," I said, walking slowly across the stage. At what was supposed to be a celebration of my work. A room full of people, most of whom I had helped directly, standing shoulder to shoulder under lights I had powered. I paused, looked at the crowd. And yet, when I arrived, dressed, ready, holding the project that had redefined our forecasting systems, they told me, "You can wait outside." I let the silence stretch, let them feel what I'd felt. I was humiliated. But more than that, I was made to feel invisible, like my ideas belonged, but I didn't. Behind me, the screen came alive. Images of the original model I built, the early blueprints, the handwritten annotations still bearing my initials. Proof. "I didn't cry that day," I said, my voice steadier than ever. I walked away, not because I had given up, but because I had finally seen the truth. I turned to face them fully. The system wasn't broken. It was designed to work that way, designed to reward volume over value, politics over purpose, theft over thought. A murmur of agreement rolled through the crowd. But instead of waiting for a door to open, I built one. With others who had also been locked out, stepped over, erased. I gestured to the side screen, photos of Verity's first team. Leo, eyes bright at 3 a.m. Tanya in her hoodie with a coffee mug the size of her ambition. Marta mid-laugh with a Sharpie in her hand and code on her sleeve. We didn't build a company to prove anything to the ones who ignored us. We built it so that no one else would ever have to feel like we did. I stepped forward. In our office, there are no open-door policies, because the doors don't need to be closed in the first place. We don't steal credit. We share it. We don't hide behind org charts. We sit beside each other. We ask people what they need, not what they're willing to sacrifice. Another image appeared behind me, a whiteboard with the phrase, "Brilliance belongs to the brave." "That's what Verity is," I said. "A place where people are seen, heard, celebrated for who they are, not how well they perform for someone else's ego." I looked across the sea of faces. And I say this now to anyone who has ever been told, you can wait outside. You don't have to wait anymore. You don't have to knock, beg, or soften yourself to fit into rooms that weren't built for you. I let the weight of that land. Let it settle in their bones. Build your room. I paused, scanning the crowd slowly. Find your people. Find your truth. Find your courage. Even if your voice shakes. Even if they laugh at first. Even if they tell you, this isn't how things are done. The screen faded to black behind me. One final phrase appeared in white. We're not waiting anymore. The applause didn't come all at once. It built slowly, like thunder approaching from the distance. Then louder and louder, until the room was on its feet. But I didn't raise my hand. I didn't take a bow. Because this wasn't about me anymore. This was about everyone who had been made to wait. Everyone who had something to say and nowhere to say it. Everyone building something real. I stepped off the stage, not into silence, but into the roar of a new world being born.